In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. Well, Toby, here we are in Shomrei Sanctuary for your funeral, just as you wanted it. Your casket is just a few feet in front of the pew where you always sat, not far from the memorial plaques for your parents. As I understand it, you fought passionately not once but twice for the right to have your funeral here at Shomrei, because Shomrei was your home and we are your family. Toby wrote in her memoir that to be part of a family, to have a sense of home was to be needed. I think that's why Toby was so active at Shomrei in her heyday, why she ran the auction and served on the board and made those signs for the Interfaith Hospitality Network. It's why she founded the Mensch Squad, and I think it's also why she asked for so many rides. Raise your hand if you ever gave Toby a ride somewhere. I received a lot of reflections about Toby. Many of them had to do with giving her a ride. One person talked about how she would just talk and talk and talk and talk, and you couldn't get a word in edgewise. And another person realized after bringing her home from a very nearby doctor's visit on a rainy day when she said, "Oh, we're here already," as much as she loved books, she loved people more. She knew that to make a place your home, you had to contribute and to make an impact. She did that here at Shomrei and also in the larger Montclair community. And we knew that she really had become family for us, because when she needed us most, we were there for her. Toby was one of a kind, a woman who set a unique path for herself and carried it off with panache. She was quite a character, a force, a person with real charisma, a trailblazer, a complicated person, a powerhouse who could be difficult at times. Toby was thoughtful, she was fiercely loyal, and she had strong opinions about everything. She took her Judaism and her relationship with God very seriously. You knew if Toby loved you, if she thought you were stylish or drab, if she was mad at you about something, or ready to pick it up again as if nothing had happened. There was never a shortage of conversations when you were with Toby, no matter your age, among topics far and wide, because she had opinions on all of them. As the rabbi of Shomrei, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Rabbi Julie Roth. I knew Toby only in the last year and a half of her life, when her battle with Alzheimer's was often getting the best of her. I saw her in moments when she lost access to words and to her sense of time. But even so, I saw true glimpses of her brilliance, her wit, her probing questions, and her quest for deep connection with all of us and with God. Today, we honor her memory. I now invite Meryl Silver up to chant Psalm 23.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, bino deshe yarbitzeni, Almei menuchot yinahaleini, nafshi yishovev, nafshi yishovev, Yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo gam ki elech b'geit salmavet lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha shivtecha umishantecha hema yinachamuni taroch lefanai shulchan taroch lefanai shulchan taroch lefanai shulchan neged sarirai deshanta vashemen roshi deshanta vashemen roshi deshanta vashemen roshi kosi revaya Achtov achesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai Vishavti beveit Adonai Vishavti beveit Adonai Liorech Yamim La-dai, dai, dai, dai La-dai, dai, dai, dai La-dai, dai, 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 da-da-da-dai La-dai, dai, dai, dai La-dai, dai, dai, dai La-dai, dai, 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 dai
These words are from Rabbi David Greenstein. This past Shabbat, our Torah portion, Yitro, tells, among other things, of the advice that Yitro, Moses' wise and big-hearted father-in-law, offers to Moses. He tells him to find special people who will be able to support Moses in guiding the community. Yitro says, you should look out from among the entire people, people of valor, who revere the Almighty, people of truth, who shun selling out. He could have been describing Toby Stein. She impressed anyone who encountered her with her forceful personality, her mighty, independent spirit, her fearless commitment to her beliefs, and to the importance of finding ways to express them in an impactful way. Back before the shul adopted the Lev Shalem Machzor for the Days of Awe, Toby was instrumental in producing booklets of supplementary readings. When I, meaning Rabbi Greenstein, first got to Shomrei, I had the privilege of reviewing her work with her. I discovered her discerning eye and ear, and most of all, I discovered her own writing. Toby was rightfully proud of her command of language. She was a novelist, essayist, and poet. Whatever she wrote displayed her authentic voice and her sheer love of getting at the right word. Oh, the right word was not only a literary concern, but a moral concern. Thus, she was always dedicated every year to writing out the signs of welcome that we used to hang on every door for each IHN family that came to stay with us. As everyone knows, Shomrei was her home, and she believed that it should also be a home for all in need. Her efforts established one of the crown jewels of our community, the Mensch Squad. Toby had a very deep and deeply complex connection to her Judaism. She worked very hard at finding an authentic way of being Jewish. This was another reason she cherished Shomrei so much. for it exemplified for her the aspiration to grow and sustain a serious and mature approach to Jewish tradition and practice. She never wished to advertise her acts of generosity, but I think it's okay to mention now her delight and pride in being able to grant support to the Masorti movement's Tali program, a program devoted to offering secular Israelis in the schools around Israel a curriculum of Judaic enrichment that was egalitarian and inclusive and non-fundamentalist. She wanted others to have the resources that she had to struggle to gain access to. Toby's fierce spirit, intellect, and energy inspired the friendship and loyalty of so many people who became her friends, even sometimes despite Toby's attempts to thwart them. I think this is because we all could sense the nobility and the purity of her quest as a person, a woman, a writer, and as a Jew. Yehi Zichrona Baruch. May her memory ever be a source of blessing. I now invite our Shaliach Tzibor Lily Lucy to share Psalm 121.
A song of ascent. I lift up my eyes to the hills. What is the source of my help? This psalm beginning with a question. As we heard Rabbi Greenstein's words about Toby's wisdom, but we know that all of our conversations, even the last few conversations, all were questions and constant seeking. Shir Lama'alot, Esa Enai El Harim, Me'ayin Yavo Ezri, Ezri Me'im Hashem, Oseh Shamayim Va'aretz, Al Yitein Lamot Raglecha, Al Yanum Shomrecha, Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. Hashem shomrecha, Hashem tzilcha, al yad yeminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, ve'yareach balayla. Hashem yishmorcha mikora, yishmor et nafshecha. Hashem yishmor tzedcha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam. Adonai will guard your going out and your coming home, now and forever.
I now invite Jerry Bloom to share a eulogy.
Toby asked me several years ago to speak at her funeral. And since then, she has told me a number of stories about her life. Unfortunately, I never wrote them down. But I'd like to share a brief overview of her life as I recall it. If I get something wrong or I'm missing something, feel free to shout out a correction. Toby would. Toby grew up on West End Avenue in the 1930s and 40s. Her parents were both immigrants from the Soviet Union. Her mother, Zelda, was able to go to Vienna to study chemistry, I believe, after all her brothers declined their father's offer to send one of them to college. Zelda eventually moved to the United States sometime in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. Toby adored her mother, and I always thought she looked a great deal like her. I think she thought she looked more like her father. You can judge. Her parents' pictures are outside. Toby's father also came to this country, I believe from Minsk, and became a jewelry designer. I remember Toby telling me that he designed beautiful things, but unfortunately was not financially successful. I think her parents met in Chicago for some reason, but obviously ended up living in New York City. They had a son, and 10 years later, Toby was born. When she was around 6, maybe, her brother invited a high school friend, a young black man who was gay and could not continue to live with his own family, to move in with the Steins. And that is how James Baldwin became, for a while, a big brother to Toby. Toby's dad died when Toby was fairly young. In fact, I saw up there 1945, so she would have been around 10 years old. And Zelda, her mother, had to work hard to support the family and ultimately to cover tuition when Toby began studying at Barnard. Unfortunately, Zelda also passed away shortly after Toby started at Barnard. Toby was terrified that she would not be able to continue her education, but Barnard made arrangements and Toby continued her studies and graduated. And she was eternally grateful to the college and was a loyal alumna. Toby went on to work in the world of advertising, at first at a company called Fuller Smith and Ross, and then for 5 years starting in 1965 at J. Walter Thompson. At Fuller, she was the only writer on the Grumman account. She worked on the Lunar Module and Gulfstream projects. I had no idea they were working on them that early. And then at Thompson, she rose to be copy group head and worked on the Ford account, as in cars. This was particularly surprising, not only because she was one of the few women on the account, but Toby never learned to drive. One summer, hence all the rides around the room, by the way. One summer, when her boss was ill, she stepped in to lead all print advertising for Ford at a critical time. It was when they were announcing the annual time they announced new models. And she was particularly proud that she never got stuck on an account for women's products like laundry and laundry detergent, makeup, perfume, that kind of thing. After her advertising career, she ran writing seminars for 10 years. And as I think everyone knows, she was also an author of several books. At least one of them is available if you're interested at the Montclair Public Library. She told me a great story, and I don't know the punchline, maybe somebody here does. While she was an editor, she had a friend who was an editor who really wanted to be a writer. And he couldn't because he was using his salary to support a wife and 4 children. So Toby went into her pocket, and this is like in the 50s or 60s, and she told me she gave him $50,000 so that he could go off and write. And his first novel was a huge hit. She told me the name, I almost fell over, except today I can't remember it. Does anybody happen to know that story? No. Okay, well, it's a mystery for all of us to solve. Perhaps it's in her memoirs. Toby was married for a while, I believe, to someone who was Catholic, and she converted. But at some point that marriage ended and she returned to Judaism. And I believe she moved to Montclair in the 80s, if I remember correctly. She told me once. So let's put it on the table. Dealing with Toby could sometimes be a challenge. She was a woman of strong opinions, and she could be quick to let you know when she didn't agree with you. Yet notwithstanding that, over the last several years, as she needed more assistance and she had no family nearby, a group of Shomrei members stepped up. Many of you are here today. You helped her move, clean up her apartment, shop for her, drove her to doctor's appointments, drove her to services and other places, visited her during the last year or so as she was in the hospital more than once, and finally visited her at her final home at Brighton Gardens. Some of you got involved through the men's squad. Some of you got involved some other way. My original draft named a few of you, but then I realized that the group is much larger than I know. So in order not to leave anybody out, I'm not naming anybody. So how is it that someone like Toby, was able to enlist all of us, some of whom had to battle their way past her resistance to help in order to become her helper. I think we all saw some truths about Toby that were sometimes not so obvious. Toby was a very moral person. She had a strong desire to do what was right. I suspect that one of the reasons that her religions were so meaningful to her was because of the moral framework they provided. She had a strong sense of honor and of right and wrong. There was a time a number of years ago when I thought Toby had done something that I didn't agree with. The disagreement didn't come between us as much as my not believing her when she told me that she hadn't done it. She told me her parents had impressed on her the importance of always being truthful, and it pained her that I thought she might be lying. This came up periodically over the years until I decided that her consistent denials were in earnest, and I told her that I believed her. I think she took a great deal of comfort from that. Toby was also very smart. She certainly liked to show it off in her comments and questions during services here, sometimes to the consternation of the rabbi of the moment. But her insights were always interesting, and I respected the clear thinking she brought to any comment. Toby grew up in and worked in a world dominated by men. She was truly part of the Mad Men generation. I suspect it must have been very frustrating for her to live in a world where she probably often had to prove herself, knowing that she was usually one of the smartest people in the room. But she learned to overcome that, and I think the determination we saw here at Shul was likely a reflection of the grit she had to draw on every day at work. With that understanding, I really respect her insisting that she be heard. Toby's writing and editing talents reflected a keen wit that she also expressed in conversation, although it was sometimes accompanied by a sting. If you could overlook the barbs, you could really marvel at the brilliance. And when you got to the good side of Toby, the one that came with a smile and a twinkle in her eye, it was a little like when your very demanding, disciplined third-grade teacher who kept the class in fear told you that you had received an A on a test. Toby's praise was not easily won, but perhaps all the sweeter when obtained. Toby was devoted to Shomrei, as was probably evident to everybody or most people here. It's not for nothing that her funeral is being held here. She petitioned the board for permission to do so when no one else has the right to do it. In her earlier years here at Shomrei, as the rabbi mentioned, she ran large fundraising auctions. The last one was while I was president. I remember how exacting she was about planning for it, and especially rounding up good auction items. She was determined to make it a huge financial success, and she pulled it off. The auction raised a lot of money. She also wrote prayers for our services, such as an alternate prayer for our country, which we have often recited during Shabbat services. Toby was also active in the community. She volunteered for Montclair's United Way and was an activist in getting the senior center built. And she also wrote ads for Metro West Federation. Another wonderful but not always seen side of Toby was the way she loved the children of Shomrei. Charlie Breslin and Lynn Rubin were among her many helpers, and perhaps one of their greatest gifts to Toby was providing an opportunity for Toby to get to know their children. Toby adored them, among others here. Another was Gabe Farbiar's. As Toby slipped into dementia and getting to shul was more difficult for her, she nonetheless was very excited about his upcoming bar mitzvah and very much wanted to be there. So this somewhat cantankerous lady turned out to be very smart, witty, determined, ready to help, and she had a soft spot for children. Not a bad resume. She was part of the fabric of this community for over 30 years, that I've been here and for more than that, and I will miss having Toby as part of our Shomrei family. Thank you.
Jerry, that was beautiful. No wonder Toby asked you to speak. And now I want to invite Carney Mims up to share a reflection.
Well, you've all just heard from Jerry, and you all know about Toby's famous, shall we say, forthrightness and directness. And I'm certainly the beneficiary of it in so many ways. Probably the greatest of those was she spotted me as someone who was on the path to becoming a Jew very early, probably before I acknowledged it myself here at Shomrei. And so she began to keep after me. In some sense, I was already a Jew, and I just needed to do the work and complete it. And of course, she was right. It took me far longer than it needed to, and if I had paid more attention to her and been less annoyed in the beginning, I would have gotten there less trouble to myself and everyone else. The other thing that she was particularly forthright also about is, and one reason I think I sort of instinctively approached her is that she, of course, had made the passage from one religion to another and back again. She had become a Roman Catholic and then again a Jew. So it all seemed very natural to her that I would make this passage. And she was reassuring in that I wasn't going to have to repudiate anything, my former generic Protestant status or whatever it was, and I wasn't going to have to leave anything behind either. That she was infused and enriched by having been a Catholic and having been part of the Jewish community, and she had a particular reverence for Catholic ritual and liturgy and language. So that was the first one. The other one was writing. As you've just heard, she took writing extremely seriously. And I learned early on that she was a published writer and read some of her stuff and saw that she was a good one. And I rather tentatively offered some of my writings to her to see what she thought and what I heard from her. And she may actually have used these words, that if I wanted validation, why was I wasting her time and mine? If I wanted to learn how to write and to write better, I should invite criticism and commentary and critique. And if I needed real help, I should pay for professional editing, namely hers. So I kind of sucked it up and thought about it for a while and said, I need to get more serious about this. And in due course, I guess I had become serious enough that Toby actually formed a little workshop of 4 or 5 of us that she considered adequately serious. We all improved. And I learned a great deal about Toby as well. There are some things that didn't even appear in her memoir that she wrote about it in our little group. So those were my biggest gifts. She was actually capable of humility in some circumstances. In the face of ignorance, I in addition to the driving duties, I helped her with her technology, which constantly flummoxed her one way or another. And she was uncharacteristically humble and grateful in the face of that. So there is that. So that is my gratitude for her forthright. So listen. So thank you, Toby. And she was equally direct and forthright if she admired or appreciated something of yours, and not always something deep and profound. She met my baby sister early on. I think we were having sukkah parties at our home, and my sister's dog, Duke the Whippet, and later my younger brother, and my 100-year-old mother. And she would regularly sort of burst forth with admiration about what gorgeous specimens of the wasp community were, kind of a tableau of her wasps, including Duke the dog. So, who could resist that, So again, thank you, Toby. Her memory, as you can see, certainly is a blessing, and will remain so. Thank you.
Now Charlie Breslin will share a reflection.
That was wonderful. And to think that I said to Rabbi Julie, I don't want to go after Jerry Bloom because Toby used to tell me that he was the smartest man she knew and he was going to speak at her funeral, and I really shouldn't because I'm not serious. And here's Carney, who broke the seal. So I'm safe. So Rabbi Julie, dear friends, I believe in the legend that the soul stays in this world until the body's been buried, and that Toby is still all around us taking it in. Toby, in your last days, you kept planning a great symposium on important Jewish topics with important Jewish people. I didn't quite understand what you were talking about until Alan pointed out you were looking ahead to this very day. And again, as with many things, I will do my best to fulfill your every wish. And let us take a moment to talk about important Jewish things. Toby, you told many of us about being an orphan and the subsequent rescue by Barnard, but I don't know how many you told about how you actually ended up Catholic. You told me you needed to be close to God, but you didn't quite see a path in Judaism as a young single woman with no family. You became a proud daily communicant. That means you go to Mass and take communion every day, and still to the very end maintained a stubborn belief in transubstantiation long after you returned to the Jewish people. Perhaps you even told fewer of how you returned to us, your people. You were in Safad, a mystical place, sitting alone in a shul, and all of a sudden, you heard a quiet voice that said yes. Since you told me that story, I always think of the quiet voice from Unatana Tokef, also a small voice, but with so much power. This sanctuary was truly a sanctuary for Toby. Here you found the belonging, peace, and even love, as we saw on the Shabbat when you celebrated your last birthday. Everything you feared you could not have as a young girl. Even more importantly, here you also enjoyed years of learning and intellectual stimulation on important Jewish topics. I think you often reflected on that moment in Sfad and that soft yes. Where did that voice come from? From your soul? From your parents? From trembling angels? From Hashem? So Toby, you believed in a lot of crazy things. So would it be so crazy for you to agree that the yes you heard all those years ago was from us, very important Jewish people? During this very important shiur, to answer the question, was Toby Stein an important part of our congregation, whom we loved, appreciated, will miss dearly, and always remember? Please join me in a loud voice to reach 40 years back in time to say yes. Thank you.
Lynn Rubin will now share a poem.
So as we've heard and we all know, Toby was fierce and she lived her life her own way. And in thinking about her, especially these past few days, this poem I had heard once, maybe 25 years ago, popped into my head, and I thought it was Bishert. It does not describe Toby literally, but for me, it captures her spirit. It's called Warning by Jenny Joseph. When I am an old woman, I shall wear purple with a red hat which doesn't go and doesn't suit me, and I shall spend my pension on brandy and summer gloves and satin sandals and say we've no money for butter. I shall sit down on the pavement when I am tired and gobble up samples in shops and press alarm bells and run my stick along the public railings and make up for the sobriety of my youth. I shall go out in my slippers in the rain and pick flowers in other people's gardens and learn to spit. You can wear terrible shirts and grow more fat and eat 3 pounds of sausages at a go, or only bread and pickle for a week, and hoard pens and pencils and beer mats and things in boxes. But now we must have clothes that keep us dry and pay our rent and not swear in the street and set a good example for the children. We must have friends to dinner and read the papers. But maybe I ought to practice a little now, so people who know me are not too shocked and surprised when suddenly I am old and start to wear purple.
Toby was gifted with words, with paying sharp attention and asking probing questions. Eileen Grossberg captured it beautifully. Toby was a wordsmith. She used words carefully and precisely. Though her first language was Yiddish, her work in English was flawless. But what was most striking about Toby is that she was a seeker. I can think of no better way to honor Toby's memory today than through excerpts of her own writing. I'm grateful to Nick Levitin for sharing key passages from Toby's spiritual autobiography and an essay she wrote 15 to 20 years ago when she first suspected she had Alzheimer's. All the words that follow until the very end, except for the very end, these words are Toby's words. Congregation Shomrei Emunah is now my Jewish home. That's no longer a hope or a goal, but a fact. For a long time, though, I never noticed I was home. How could that be? I had been so long without a home that I failed to recognize that Shomrei could be one for me. That's not hard to understand if you remember that since I moved out of 851 West 177th Street, I never thought of my current address as home. Where I got my mail, where I hung my clothes, kept my books, ate, slept, but home was over with. It's such a fine word, home. One plain syllable, rich with content and natural for samplers. Everyone knows what home means. It's the safe place where they are, your family. But it was such a surprise that when Shomrei became my home, whatever day or year that was, I didn't mark on my heart's calendar that something extraordinary had happened. It had to be a huge event, having a home again. But taking that in, believing it, was beyond me. Why I thought I might have Alzheimer's. I am a writer. A writer is someone who is impelled to communicate. That takes knowing how to use words clearly. It also takes a knack for paying attention. Whether writing fiction or nonfiction, a writer who doesn't have the gift of paying close attention isn't going to do a good job. I never watched anyone get old. Both of my parents died young, my father at 52, my mother at 61. As I moved into the thick of middle age, I realized because I live alone, I'd better start paying closer attention to how my body and my mind were keeping up with my spirit. Mind you, I did not decide to turn keeping tabs on my health into a hobby. There are many things in the world that interest me more. But I began to keep an eye on how I was doing. Last fall, it seemed to me that I was making significant mistakes, both in what I said and certain of my daily activities. I had begun to be mildly forgetful years earlier, the way people in their 50s do, but now the forgetfulness I was experiencing was in a different class. I felt as though I had been in Forgetfulness 101 for several years, and suddenly found myself in Forgetfulness 301. From where I customarily sit in the sanctuary, I can easily see the plaques honoring my parents. It was Rabbi Schnitzer who figured out how I could buy both plaques at once during a time I was unable to come up with their substantial costs together. How my eyes are drawn to those plaques. Some Saturdays when services end, I walk over to them and on tiptoe lay a finger kiss on the parent's name about whom I'm thinking at the moment. But any Shabbat, I am likely to glance across the width of the sanctuary at the plaques and feel my parents' presence in shul. Never mind they're in my synagogue, Zelda and Louis Stein in any synagogue. I think they don't mind. The first thing I noticed that disturbed me was that my typing changed radically. I never took a typing course, but my 2 index fingers typed pretty damn fast and, more importantly, accurately. One day I was shaken to reread a page I had just typed and find numerous words that looked as though they'd been typed by a monkey who also hadn't taken typing. It wasn't a fluke. The next page, the next day, were no better. My typing had become terrible so quickly that the deterioration seemed overnight, although, of course, it cannot have happened that fast. I began proofreading every sentence. My professional life as a writer and editor is centered around words. What was causing the sudden inability to do adequately something I'd done for decades? I began to notice something else that was odd. When I opened my dictionary to look up a word, I found myself hesitating because I wasn't sure exactly where in the alphabet the first letter came. That is, I would know right off that W wasn't towards the beginning or even the middle of the alphabet, but I wasn't sure any longer whether it came before or after V, something I probably knew when I was a toddler. I compensated. I discovered that if I said 4 or 5 letters in order, I could hone in on the right one. I wanted to shut my eyes to what was happening, but I could not look away. I became very afraid of boiling water. After the 4th or 5th time, I found myself holding a pot of ready spaghetti with no idea of where to empty it. Again, I did not burn myself, but the burning in my chest was happening more often. It was beginning to burn clear through my cherished sense of control over my actions. I bought a new computer. After I slid open the carton with my scissors, unpacked the computer, and threw out the cartons, I discovered that the scissors had vanished. I searched the house twice, 4 times, 6 times. It took me a couple of weeks to give up. A sturdy left-handed scissors can't be replaced at the corner hardware store. A sturdy sense of self is irreplaceable. I have always liked being alone. My mistakes were making me feel alone in a new way, which I didn't like. I hated it. No single thing I noticed weighed heavily enough to ground me, but together, over a period of 3 months, they clipped my wings. I could no longer fly. I have not forgotten that I will never be a Jewish mother, nor, believe me, do I ever get to forget for how long, how empty it sometimes feels to be a Jewish woman who has no children, nor any grandchildren to cavil over, to take joy in their every accomplishment. Still, on any day Shomrei school is in session and I happen to be around, I stop and I watch the children. Almost every time I find myself thinking that in some, I pray, real sense, these are my grandchildren. My heart lifts. I laugh. I brought my suspicions to a neurologist, a physician justifiably well known in his profession, whom I had seen on and off for 20 years. He said he thought I was wrong. He reminded me that I had taken a series of verbal tests only a year and a half earlier, and I had aced them. Besides, he said, I was too savvy, too smart to be in the grip of early onset Alzheimer's. I said smart was a relative description. I was smart enough to know I wasn't as smart as I used to be. I thought I might still be smart enough to have figured out that something was wrong with me. In any case, I wanted to know. Of course, I didn't want to know, but I was pretty sure knowing would be less frightening than wondering. I have always found it easier to deal with reality than the unknown. I asked him to order the test. I did not take school or studying seriously. I think I knew I was smart enough, but I definitely did not think that was any more to my credit or indeed significant than my having green eyes. Indeed, when I was about 11, I bounced in from school one day to announce that I'd taken an IQ test and had a marvelous score. My mother raised an eyebrow. If you got 160, that meant you were a genius, and I got 158, I said. And just why do you think that's marvelous, she asked. Mama, I said, it means I don't have to be a genius. That next visit, I left the doctor's office knowing that I did have Alzheimer's. I also knew that I had two weapons, my own intelligence and the best medicine available. I did not cry. Somewhat to my surprise, I haven't cried in the 6 months since then. I am not someone who's afraid to cry, and I think a diagnosis of Alzheimer's is a sufficient reason for tears. But something inside me said that all that had changed now. Instead of being afraid I had Alzheimer's, I knew I did, and I could start to fight. I had things to do. Because I do not have immediate family, I decided to tell a few close friends right away. Although I didn't know when I would need a support group, I knew I would need one sometime. It was vital to include people who were good at doing and others who were good at listening. I think that's what the rides were all about. I'm doing what everybody with even half a brain does when he or she finds out there's a life-threatening disease ticking inside of them. I lick every bit of cream off each good day. I'm rewriting a novel, The One That Got Away, which I think is the most important novel I've got in me. As soon as that's completed, I will write my spiritual autobiography, something I've been encouraged to do because I've had one exciting spiritual journey. It seems that God isn't done with me, doesn't it? I've noticed lately how very often, I only hear God speaking in the voices of other people. A new task then, to become an even better listener, taking in carefully what others say, learning from their words, as I do from the content of God's silences, to grow more open and kinder. Kinder is not an afterthought. It's what I have begun to pray hardest to learn how to be. I wholeheartedly recommend finding out a modest amount about Alzheimer's, enough not to be spooked by it, enough to spur you to make the most of what I hope your life has taught you, that enjoying a fine day or a good day is among the best choice life offers. I can't tell you what it's like to have Alzheimer's once it's eaten up your memory and your ability to speak and to know whom the face in front of you belongs to. I haven't been there yet. No one has who has been able to say what it's like. Maybe when there's only a sliver left of your mind, that sliver does remember how delicious life was before. Then again, maybe the final stage of Alzheimer's end is not that sad for the patient. Maybe at the end of the mental line, there is the peace of genuine nothingness. One can hope. There may come a time when I will no longer have Alzheimer's, Alzheimer's will have me. But I will hold it at bay with every strand of my mental strength, every penny of my hope, and every ounce of my faith. I still feel free to write and pray and play, to do everything I can to keep my mind alive, and I work on my spirit every day. I work on my spirit every day. And I must say that for me, this turns out to be a time when having a 40-year-old relationship with God is useful. It is integral to my belief that the one necessity for having a relationship with God is a willingness to live with uncertainty. There is no way to be certain that God exists the way that you can be sure that a chair exists. Accepting that 4 decades ago and still choosing to center my life in God prepared me, I find, to accept the incertitude that is the everyday weather of early Alzheimer's. What I know with certainty is that I am nearly all still here. And with the help of God, my doctor, my friends, and my dogged search for answers, I'll be around for a while. Don't you forget that. And if I start to, remind me, please. But oh, how I'd like more opportunities to listen to people who want to talk about God. It seems that God isn't done with me, doesn't it? If you, dear reader, and this is how her spiritual autobiography ends, if you, dear reader, new friend, choose to embark on a journey of your own, always keep in mind that it's your journey. Wherever it takes you, I hope you have, as I am still having, the adventure of a lifetime. And if by chance we happen to meet on one road or another, I hope each of us will recognize a friend. And as we each go on, wave. I visited Toby a few hours before she died to sing the Shema and to say the final vidui, the final prayers of confession and forgiveness. As I sat at her bedside next to her bookshelf surrounded by her artwork, I was struck by how peaceful she looked. The penultimate time I had visited Toby, she recognized me, but her words were jumbled. I could understand phrases here and there, but I couldn't follow the arc of the conversation at all. Now at her bedside, there were no longer words, just her breathing in and out, surrounded by the thoughts and the prayers of the Shomrei community, the peace of the genuine nothingness she hoped for, encased in our love. To Toby, I share this final tribute, the words you wrote to a dear friend when she died. I know you are with God now. I also know how sure you are of your point of view, but please don't boss God around. And if he has a suggestion, try it. Oh, never mind. I'm sure he's making you welcome, just as you are. Toby Stein, may you rest in peace. I now invite Sarah Kravitz to share a poem.
Ooh. So some years ago, an envelope arrived in my mailbox, and Toby had sent me a printout of a poem that was particularly needed in that time because, as everyone knows, Toby paid attention, and I was learning. So this poem is by Kaylin Hott, but I really feel that perhaps somehow it was written by Toby herself. I asked God if it was okay to be melodramatic, and she said yes. I asked her if it was okay to be short, and she said it sure is. I asked her if I could wear nail polish or not wear nail polish. And she said, honey, she calls me that sometimes. She said, you can do just exactly what you want to. Thanks, God, I said. And is it even okay if I don't paragraph my letters? Sweet cakes, God said. Who knows where she picked that up? What I'm telling you is yes, yes, yes.
Please rise for the El Malei Rachamim Memorial Prayer. El Malei Rachamim Shochen Bamromim Hamzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShekhinah במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מסעירים. את נשמת יונה בת שמואל לוזר וזליה, שהלכה לעולמה, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה. אנא בעל הרחמים אסתירה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר amen. El Malei Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Toby Stein, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.